好，谢谢你。我之前
Hello, folks on Zoom. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. We're gonna start in just a couple minutes. We'll just give it a little bit more time for folks to trickle in person or online. Thanks for the folks who've come out today. All right, everyone. I'm gonna get started here. So yeah, thanks everyone for coming out on Zoom and in person. My name's Max Krieger, and I'll be talking about Datawrapper today. Datawrapper is a free online tool to make data visualizations. You don't need really any coding experience to get started here. From making some pretty basic visualizations, but you can do a lot with this. You can get into some more advanced stuff too. So really, wherever you're at with your data visualization journey, you can learn stuff with Datawrapper. So today we're going to be making a bar chart and making a map, a choropleth map. So these are some examples of data visualizations that have been made with Datawrapper. Some of these, one of these I made this here in the top left corner, but some of these I've just pulled from the Datawrapper showcase. So you can make all different types of bar charts, you can make maps, and I really love using Datawrapper because you can make things pretty quickly. So I'd say the best use case scenario for something like Datawrapper are for punchier graphics. If you want to convey a quick story, I see these used in news publications. I think New York Times uses a custom data wrapper platform. I think one of these newspapers from Philadelphia uses them. Um, so in my line of work, which is in public health, we use this platform a lot for trying to quickly convey some information. So to get started with Datawrapper, I should also drop this link in the chat. You can go to datawrapper.de. I think that's all we need to get started. Let me just try that. And that should bring you should see an option in the top right corner, maybe for, should I say dashboard or login or something like that. That's gonna allow us to create a Datawrapper account. So you can do that with your Google account. You can do it with a GitHub account. And this is just gonna let you store all of your different creations and things like that. So everyone seeing this? Okay. All right. So while people get registered, I just want to kind of quickly go over some of the resources here on Datawrapper. So we're just going to cover a couple simple things today, but there's a ton of other, they have like this Datawrapper Academy. This really covers like every kind of visualization that they have on here and how to use those. They have not this blog, this Datawrapper River, which I really love. This is a collection of data visualizations that like they have cherry picked that people have made, but it also is just like kind of a feed of like other visualizations that people are publishing. So sometimes I'll just kind of browse this just to get an idea of like what is possible with Datawrapper, which is really cool. And they also have this great feature where you can reuse these data visualizations, and that actually allows you to see how people have set things up, and see kind of the way the data needs to be set up in order to make those types of visualizations. So yeah, interesting things. But we're gonna keep it pretty basic today. And we're gonna create a bar chart. So I will also drop this in the chat. I have some prepared data for us to follow along. And I'll show folks, if people haven't used GitHub before, how to download that data. This is the way I've done it. I could be wrong. I'm not a GitHub expert. But if you select code and then download zip, that's going to give you all of the information that you need to get started. So let me switch back here. There's going to be a lot of switching around today. So from your main Datawrapper screen, top right corner, we're going to select Create New and select Chart. So this is the basic layout of all Datawrapper visualizations. No matter what you want to use, these are kind of the 4 basic steps. The first is that we're going to upload our data. You can type in your data here. You can connect to a CSV, which I've prepared for today. You can also connect to Google Sheets or external data sets. So in the example that I showed before, I had actually been connected to a Google Sheet that the Rhode Island Department of Health was hosting. Anytime they would update the information, that would live feed into Datawrapper. So these can be helpful in having dynamically updated visualizations as well. But today we're just going to be uploading a CSV. So I'm going to select our od race discov.csv file. When I do that, it's going to load that information right in here. So yeah, again, you could, in theory, just type in all of this information however you wanted to. You could modify things directly here. But this is basically the format that we're going to need to get started with our line charts today. This looks a little bit different than perhaps how I would expect this data to appear. I think in like a traditional data set, you'd have your year column, and then the second column would maybe be a race column, and a third column would be the values. So something to note here is that what type of visualization you want to use in Datawrapper is really going to dictate how you set up your data. So in this case, I had to create a pivot table to accommodate this data. Where did I go here? So just yeah, I would just note that if you have data and you just upload it into this and you're trying to create a visualization and it's not working, there might need to be some data manipulation that you do. So I would always say do all of your data manipulation and all that stuff beforehand. It's going to be so much easier. But in this view, we can select all of these different columns. Datawrapper's already kind of understood that like this first column is a date column and that the subsequent columns are numbers. But this is where you could kind of change the format there. You have the ability to add columns too. So you could create custom columns with calculated fields. So again, a lot deeper we could dive into there, but today, keeping it simple here.
Like on the left, like mine, it doesn't.
You mean this stuff?
Oh, you just click.
Yeah. So as the question was like, how did this information pop up about like the min, median, max? Yeah, again, if you're clicking through some of these columns, you're going to see different options. You could round numbers, for example, if I wanted to round these to zeros. You could hide it entirely from the visualization. So I think that's probably a bit more helpful if you're connecting to a dynamic data set that you have less control over. Alrighty, so next we're gonna proceed. You can hit that blue proceed button. You can also just kind of click around between these top level items. But we're gonna start to visualize this. Again, because I set up the data for a line graph, it's going to automatically detect that. But you can kind of flip through some of these other visualization options. They might not really make sense based on how we've set up the data currently. So my recommendation would be, yeah, if there's a specific type of visualization you want to check out, then use that resource repository that Datawrapper has to identify that visualization and just get an understanding of how that data should be set up. So the goal today is to create a visualization that shows fatal overdose deaths in Rhode Island and fatal overdose death rates in Rhode Island. And I think the trend that I really want to highlight here is that Black or African American Rhode Islanders have had a higher rate of overdose than some of these other groups. And that trend has really risen since 2018, and it hasn't really dropped since then. So I just click that proceed button, and that's going to allow me now to start to refine this visualization a bit more. There's a lot of different options here for customization. Um, you can select, for example, like which columns you want to show here. Again, these might not really make sense with how the data is set up. So I'm just going to stick with showing year horizontally. And yeah, this kind of is already looking pretty good. I might turn off some of these axis things like turning off a grid, for example. I actually am just going to show the values on these lines. So
Wait, I'm sorry.
we'll go
How'd
over
you get to
that
the axis?
in a second.
Wait, I'm sorry. How did you
Yeah.
get to the axis?
What about other ethnic groups not shown here? Was there not enough data?
Yeah, so this was I can show y'all where I pulled this data from. This was pulled from a repository in the Rhode Island Department of Health data hub. So yeah, this is purely just the data that was available. But yeah, you can use whatever data you want to use here, and I can link where this was pulled from at the end as well.
So how did you
All
get
right,
the
so
axes
the
that we're
next thing I
showing?
want to do, I want to start to highlight this trend here. And like I said, this tool is really helpful for trying to convey a specific point that you want to make. So, this might not be the best for, having a ton of information on here, but I really want to highlight this one trend here. So I want to start to manipulate these lines here and start to actually customize how these look. So I'm going to, you can see each of these different basically items here for each of the lines. I'm going to select this button for all of them. I want to make them all a little bit bigger. So I'm going to increase the width of them. There's options here to smooth out these lines. This is kind of like, yeah, like you can, maybe this is more of a stylistic choice. I kind of like it. It's not always indicative of how the data is actually appears. And I will set all of these to like a gray color for now. You'll see why in a sec. So now I'm going to deselect all of them. And I want to select Black or African American line. And this one I'm going to make a little bit thicker. And I'm going to give it an orange color. Oh, the other thing that I wanted to do was to add labels and so that you can actually see the values of these. So for all of the lines, I'm going to enable the values here. So that's going to show kind of start to end 2017 to 2023, how things have changed. There's a lot of other options here you could do. You could add a bunch of different points to the lines. You could just choose to show the lines at the end. There's symbology here that you can do. You can add circles to them if you wanted to. But I think this is looking fine as it is. There's other options here. We can add more of like a margin to the side if you needed more space there. Just put that to 0. It's going to do it automatically. So yeah, this is kind of just, I don't know, a couple minutes and we have something here that is already starting to work. And yeah, this is I had seen this this visualization in the New York Times, and this was really something that I was like, oh, that I think is something we could, it would be. I thought it was like a nice use of colors to really highlight a particular trend here. the other thing that they did was add a couple of different contextual factors as well. So, you don't always necessarily have to show everything just in terms of pure raw numbers. I really liked that they were able to kind of highlight this growing trend of cognitive fog following the pandemic. So I want to do something similar with our visualization here. Not sure where that slide went. So I want to add what's called a what's it called? If we hit proceed, a text annotation. Here we go. So the next tab here is annotating. This is where we're going to add all of this other text to really start to fill this visualization out. So I want to add an annotation to really highlight that point that the rate here has really risen and it hasn't fallen. So once you hit this text annotation, you can click anywhere on the visualization and start to type out what you want to say there. So I could say something like rates for Black or African American Rhode Islanders rose sharply in 2019. And you can grab these little sides, you can make it longer or more squat. You can really move this wherever we want to put it. And now that's going to live right over here under this text annotations area. And there's a couple of other things I want to do to just create more of like a visual cohesion here. So we can make this bold. We can change the color to match the line that we have highlighted there. If you add a text outline, that's just going to make it so if it's resting on anything, it kind of creates a little halo effect around it. What else can we do? You can give it a curvy line. You can have the line match the color. You can increase the width of that. So just that alone is a nice, I don't know if it's necessarily like required for this visualization. I think we've already done a pretty good job, but just to give y'all like I don't know, an idea of what other things you could do here. If you had a ton of different, line points, or you'll see in a bit when we do the map, like these can be helpful for highlighting a particular trend there. But the text annotations can be really helpful. You can do the same with these like highlight ranges. We could have done something similar here. So yeah, just some ideas. And then I think any visualization, you really want to add a title to highlight what people should be looking at here. We always say like lead with what you want people to really take away from it, rather than having to kind of think through and interpret it. So I'm going to say here, rates of fatal overdose among Black, African American, Rhode Islanders rose sharply in 2019, but have, let's say, been slow to fall. I don't know, something like that. You can add a description here, data from 2017 to 2023. And the notes here can be helpful for highlighting, maybe how the data was collected, where it was collected from, if there are caveats to that information, you can link out to the data source where that came from. So actually, I think I have that right here. And let me put this in the chat too. I know someone had asked. I think Joe had asked about that. So I can just copy this link, put that in my data source. I could say the data source is Rhode Island Department of Health. They have notes here. So I can just copy that, put that here. Who created the visualization? CCB DSCoV participants. They have descriptions here for screen readers too, which is nice. So yeah, I mean, those additions really kind of make this, yeah, it allows you to have this visualization stand on its own. So you could, include this in an article. I've used this for journal figures too, like simple ones. So there's a lot you can do just with this like annotation section. Alrighty. Last tab is our layout tab. And this is just another couple of options to get this ready for publication. So for example, you can allow people to download the image or download your visualization as an image. You can enable an embed link, and you can add your social media buttons there too. I also like Datawrapper because you don't have to worry about desktop versus mobile versus tablet views. Down at this preview section below the visualization, you can just kind of flip through and see what this would look like on each of these devices. So that's just native to Datawrapper, which is really cool. You can do colorblind checks, and you can also see what it might look like in dark mode. So yeah, I turned our little text annotation into a just kind of like a field note there, which is cool. Yeah, okay, let's hit proceed. So last tab here, publish and embed. This is where you can choose to download the image. If you publish it, what that does is basically pushes this to Datawrapper's server and assigns it a URL that other people can access. So if you download the image, you can share that. It doesn't have to live online anywhere. But if you want it to live online and have people access any of these like interactive features, like, there's drop-down menus or highlighting, things like that, you'll need to have that published. One other thing I should say, if I'm going to switch back to this visualization tab and go to our layout, I think this is where you can, yeah, okay. I was wondering where these like the resolution settings were. So if you export this, you can specify your exact size there. You can just include the chart and things like that. So for like a journal article, for example, they might have super specific requirements for the size of it and things like that. So you can dial it in with that. I think with the publish now, I think it kind of automatically, okay, yeah, here we go. You can create an embed code with a responsive iframe. So that's what's going to allow you to switch between, if you have this on a website, it's going to react to whether it's a mobile or desktop. So that's our bar chart. Any questions before we get into making a map?
I just have a question.
Cool.
In the
Alrighty.
beginning, when I was trying to
So
attach
let's move along to our map now. Okay. So we are going to create a new map. So just like we created a chart, we're gonna go to that create new button, which is, I'm having to switch through a lot of screens here. Right at the top right. And if you hover over that, you can see create new map. Datawrapper has a couple of different map options here. I've never been a fan of symbol maps. I really don't know like when those are most helpful. They have these locator maps too, which are like I've seen like different ways people have used those. But you're like, I think the most like recognizable common map, at least that I use in public health, is this choropleth map. Alrighty. So Datawrapper I think handles maps pretty well. They have a pretty robust infrastructure for handling lots of different types of map data. So for example, if we type in Rhode Island, you can see all of these different base layers that are native to Datawrapper, which means like they have the map polygons here, and all you would need is the matching data there. So like this is just an example. You don't have to follow along this, but if I selected this municipality map for Rhode Island, you can kind of see how they expect this information to look. So if you had the values here, like it would be pretty easy to just start building a map here.
Is the want to do, or is it kind of automatically align them?
So the question was, do you have to know the structure of your map data before you create a map? I would say it would be very, very helpful. I think would just, like we were covering with the line charts as well, it would be just as helpful to know what Datawrapper expects that data to look like before you enter it. So that's why I would suggest, like, if you know generally the type of map that you want to create, to first look on here and see if they have those files or those base layers for you. So we're actually going to be doing more of like a custom map today, because we're going to be creating a map of Providence, which they don't have. Maybe they do. Yeah, they don't have maps of Providence. But I'd say if you have like state or country data, that should come pretty standard, and you can see by selecting the maps here what that data should look like. But today I've prepared a custom map for us to dive into. So you can look up your layers here. You can also upload your own custom map here. And that takes what's called a GeoJSON file, which is basically contains map information. It tells Datawrapper how to draw a polygon like this. And then we have another CSV file that has data that we're going to put within that map layer. So this is more advanced, but we're going to cover a lot of the same underlying visualization principles that you would use to create a map that is already exists here on Datawrapper. So if we go to upload map, I have this map geometry.geojson. And when we upload that, now we can see here, this is the custom map that I've prepared of Providence. So this is what's called a polygon, and it contains all of the individual pieces of information that we'll need to fill now with data that matches that. And this is basically called a join, where we have map information and we have our information stored in a CSV. They use a matching key, and Datawrapper knows, okay, this is object ID number one. Object ID number one in the data is this. So we're going to put that there. Okay, so we have our map. Looks like this. We can hit proceed. And now we're going to start to put some data in this. So I'm going to go to this upload file. And now I'm going to put our map data.csv here. So I've set this up to work, but it took me a little bit to get this set up. I think if you're at the point where you're like making custom maps, you should be able to figure out how to do this. But if you're starting from scratch, it might take a little bit longer to get to this point. But again, there's a lot of references and resources to dive further into this. So the map that we're going to make today is of Providence, and I want to show these different health equity zones. And the data that we have here, it's called mean exceed 3.5. This is information that I gleaned from the Department of Health. I'm not sure if this data is available anymore. I had downloaded this last year, and it's been helpful for this presentation. But essentially, these show lead tests in Providence and among these different census block groups, the percentage of tests among children that have exceeded this safe limit. So what I want to highlight today, this is like kind of a real world example. We had been working with these health equity zones, and someone from this 02907 health equity zone had this data, and they wanted to highlight basically what the situation was in their specific area in Providence. So I want to walk through how we got them to kind of a final product. So just like before, if you select each of these different columns, there's a bunch of different options that pop up. In this case, because I uploaded this custom map, there was a key called object ID, and it wants to know which column that corresponds to it. It should automatically have detected this column as object ID. And we want to make sure that we use this other column as our values, which is essentially what is going to give our map color. And then this other column was other information contained in that GeoJSON file that will come in handy down the line. So as you hit these proceed buttons, this is kind of what I was mentioning, this matching key. This should all be set already. And finally, it will do a check and it'll say like, yeah, everything matched. If it didn't, it's going to highlight which ones didn't, and you can modify those directly here. Okay. So very similar. Now we're in our visualization tab at the top. And this is where we can start playing around with some colors and all the fun stuff. So it's using by default this lead value, but you could also, for example, if I just wanted to like create a couple of different maps, I could highlight on here what are the different health equity zones. So you can imagine if I wanted to say like, hey, like, we're going to be focusing on this health equity zone today. You don't have to have all of your information live in one map. But I want to show this lead data. You can select different palettes here. For something like this, because it's along like a continuous spectrum, I'd recommend these top ones. These bottom three are for diverging values. So like think -1, 0, and 1. These might not really make sense. And you can create your own palettes here. This is where, if you have like a visual brand, you could really start to, get very specific here. Okay, so this already looks pretty good. We can see all these different neighborhoods in Providence and really where there are higher levels of childhood-led rates. But I want to take it a little bit further because I want the story here to focus on one particular neighborhood. So I'm going to use what's called a pattern overlay. And this is going to paint a pattern on top of our map. So for this, I want to use this health equity zone field. And if I go to add pattern, we can start to add these different values that populate here. So in this case, I want to focus on the 02907 neighborhood. So I'm actually going to select every single one except for that. You might.
I guess one in the chat is wondering. Oh, it doesn't respond. They're asking where did you put the data for values?
Yeah. Yeah, so there was a question about where do we add the data for values. So the first step was to upload the map, and then the next step is to upload a CSV file, which should contain that data. And we use this mapdata.csv file, and that should then populate our data table here. Alrighty. So we've added our pattern overlays for all of our neighborhoods except for this 02907 neighborhood. The story I want to tell here is not like highlighting all of the different neighborhoods in Providence that are at highest risk. I'm speaking from like, hey, I'm someone from this 02907 has this is like my district. These are the neighborhoods that I want to focus on. So similar like we did with the lines, you can style all of these different pattern overlays a bit different. But I'm going to select all of them by selecting one, holding shift and selecting the one at the bottom. And you can start to mess with some of the styles here. I'm going to put the color to white and increase the opacity to 100%. So the idea here is I want to draw attention to like this cluster of neighborhoods within Providence. It doesn't hide that data underneath, like you can still mouse over those. I want people's eyes to really draw to that neighborhood. So that looks pretty good. That looks good. We have some options here for our legend for the map, for the colors, and also for the patterns. So if you had different patterns, that might make more sense to show here, but I'm just gonna hide that. There's some cool interactive features with the legends. You can enable highlighting. So wherever you're highlighting on the map, it's gonna show where that is on your legend up at the top. You can make it zoomable, so you could zoom into a particular neighborhood. That can be cool. Yeah, you can hide like the borders between regions. So yeah, there's a lot of different things you could do in theory here. All right, but I think that looks good for now. There's some other annotations I want to add on to here. We need a title. We can maybe give the legend a little bit of a facelift. But all of those things are going to be in this next tab, which is annotate. All right, so just like we kind of glean some of the text from our data source for the bar chart, we can do something similar for this map as well. And again, I lost access to that data source, but I have text that I will throw this in the chat. It's going to be long. But there it is. And that's what I'm going to use for my titles and my description. And lastly, my notes. And I'm just doing this just to save time here, but you do want you want a descriptive title. You really want, in this case, like we had been working with someone to help them really highlight the data that was in their neighborhood. And so this is where, like, if you had other, qualitative information or quantitative information that you want to include here, those are things that you could highlight in the description. So data source, I'm not going to add all that because it's very similar to the line chart. One thing I do want to add is another one of these text annotations. So again, yeah, I can select anywhere on the map. And I want to say the 02907 neighborhood has high levels of lead. Change the size of this, make this let's say 20 point. And as you move this around, you can move the text around wherever you want. You can also move this line. So I'm going to put it somewhere over there. We need to give it a nice curve line. Can draw a circle at the end of it. So we could draw a big circle here if you wanted to. Wonder how high this goes. All right. So if you really wanted to make a point, you could draw a really big circle. I'll leave that. Why not? So all your text annotations will be stored here. I think that looks good to me. Again, yeah, you can mess with all this stuff. Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of things you can do just to make it look however you want to, really. But yeah, I think that's essentially it. Let me see. Oh, tooltips. Yeah, I know there's one other thing I want to cover. So with maps, tooltips are pretty important here. As you highlight, a tooltip is basically this info box as you mouse over things, or if you click on a neighborhood. Right now, this doesn't really make a lot of sense. 449, 18.4. I want to change that tooltip. So if you go to customize tooltips, this is going to give you some different options here. This can all be very highly customized, but it's going to load in automatically whatever's in your data set. So in this case, I want it to show region name is basically like say neighborhood. So I'm going to do neighborhood number something. Okay, so neighborhood number 449. And then I don't want region value. I'm going to put this mean exceed. I'm going to put a little percent. And I'm going to say tests exceeding safe limits. safe lead limits. Lead test, no, lead limits. That seems good. Yeah, you can use if-then statements here, HTML formatting. So if there's a lot more that you wanted to do with your tooltips, you could do that there. But now they make a lot more sense. Oh, one other thing I wanted to do, I'm not sure where this was missed, but I want this legend to make a little bit more sense. I think that's in the Refine tab. And if I scroll down to legend, yeah, okay. I want to change this to a percentage. So now it's going to be between 8 and 23%. And I want to give it a title as well. And rather than this, very database title, we'll say lead tests exceeding safe limits. Alrighty. Can change the size of that too. Make it bigger. Keep it within the visualization. You could put it underneath somewhere. Let's keep it top left. Inside top left. Alrighty. Proceed. And very similar, yeah, for this layout and you can have people download it if they want to. All right. So that's it. So I'm ready to publish this. I'm going to get that published. I can share this in the chat. So if anyone wants to see what we did today, that's the link for it in the chat. Yeah, that's essentially it. There's a question from Joe in the chat. How did you get the map to just zoom in on province? Yeah, so as I mentioned, this was a custom map that I made, a custom polygon, which is a GeoJSON file. That's for today. There's, you can look up how to create GeoJSON files. But Datawrapper, again, has their own base maps that you can use for data. So if you want to make your own custom map that has a custom polygon, maybe a particular city or a conglomerate of different states or something, you're going to have to investigate other ways to do that. And if you have something specific in mind, definitely get in touch with me after this, which I will do. I'll show up my my email. So yeah, again, I would just encourage people to check out this river so you can get inspired. And they have all these resources. We covered all that at the beginning. And I'm going to put my email in chat for folks as well. Maxwell. Yeah, but that's it for today. That's all I've got. Yeah, question.
What do you found is what are the limitations of mixing this? Like, are there types of data sets it doesn't well with, or are there things you can't do? Or,
Yeah. So the question was limitations, like what data sets wouldn't you want to use with Datawrapper? What cases would you might consider something else? Datawrapper is really good for these kind of, I'd say, like brief data visualizations where you don't want too many like interaction points. You're not trying to filter through a massive data set and refine that. You might want to use something like Tableau or Power BI for that, or some other type of like large database query visualization software. This is really good for these like smaller data visualizations that you want to achieve, like, you want to highlight, a specific data point. Though we did just make a custom map. So like there are ways to do it. I would just say like, yeah, if you're trying to have a ton of different filters and maybe you have a very particular way you want things laid out, you're kind of beholden to how Datawrapper organizes their UI and their elements. You also can't customize things like text. Their base version of Datawrapper, it's like what we went through is pretty much what you get. So if you had like, if you want to use specific fonts or hyper-specific color schemes, if you want to customize like, yeah, sizes of the axis labels and things like that, you might hit a limit there, and you might want to consider something like Tableau. There were some questions last time also about connecting other types of like live data sets. I've really only used this with Google Sheets, but I know it's possible to connect this to other types of dynamic databases. So yeah, that's, I think, broadly what I'd say. Any questions from any folks in chat? And thanks everyone for coming out today. I appreciate the thank yous and all that. Cool. Well, please don't be a stranger. My email's there. And yeah, thanks to everyone for coming out. Signing off.